Hello everyone, in this video I'll focus on the newest Arachnophobia campaign and highlight some of the concerns regarding the franchise's direction. I've delayed making this review and my lack of vocal criticism has led to some misunderstandings about my stance, so I hope this video clarifies my thoughts. Discussing Alliance is mentally exhausting. The game has been divisive, with some praising it as the best in the franchise, while others like me seeing it as the worst. Some believe it improves upon Vengeance, while others argue it barely addresses its flaws. Rather than debating these perspectives, I'll focus on what worked and what didn't in the Arachnophobia update, so let's jump right in. And before we actually start, I would kindly ask for your viewer discretion and open-mindedness, since the things that I'm going to be talking about may not appeal to every one of you. Just know that my goal is not to hate on Ironhide or Alliance as a whole. My goal is to simply point out the things I didn't like, so with that said, let's continue. Before I start talking about anything regarding the update, I think that it is a good idea to firstly mention the lore that is related to it, just so you get on the same page as me and understand clearly the atmosphere that it's trying to bring. Essentially, the Arachnophobia campaign takes place in the Cold Settlement, where the third Spider Queen Mijael has established her lair. Seeking vengeance for her slain sisters Saraugas and Mactan, she allies with the Overseer cultists, who are leaderless after the defeat of the Overseer. Their mutual goal is simple: to stop the Alliance from merging further. Our scouts, goblins and Wenerians discover the cultists and Mijael's forces while investigating webbed victims near the temple courtyard. Urgent action is required to prevent Mijael and her allies from overrunning the area. Predictably, we slay Mijael only to witness a surviving spider delivering news of her defeat to another unknown Spider Queen. This open-ended conclusion leaves room for speculation about future conflicts. The redeemed cultists who abandon their worship of the Overseer join our side, which adds an interesting narrative touch. However, the storyline itself feels very generic. Essentially, we just simply see spider kill spider, bigger spider awaits. Mijael's hybrid spider human design further detracts from the immersion. A fully arachnid boss would have been much more thematically consistent. While the war serves its purpose, it fails to excite or innovate. If there's just one thing that I expect Alliance to get every single update right, it's that Hakon Davidson never fails to deliver. The OST surrounding Arachnophobia is simply fantastic. The soundtrack remixes themes from previous cult areas, adjusting them to fit the spider aesthetic, which I absolutely love. The boss theme, though reminiscent of Navira's music, successfully builds tension and pressure, elevating the atmosphere. While I don't have any criticisms here, I can only hope future expansions maintain this high standard of OST. About the enemies of Arachnophobia, where do I even begin? Simply put, they are the sole reason that made me make this video. Before I explain what I mean by this, let's firstly take a closer look at each enemy, see its abilities and what it serves to the table. The first enemy that we find inside Arachnophobia are Glare Brutes. They are not a new enemy, we've already seen them in the cultist stages. They act as the basic enemy of this campaign, which is usually spammed amongst the waves of the stages. The next enemy that we encounter inside this campaign are Ballooning Spiders, which are the flank enemy of this campaign. They're essentially inspired by real-life flank spiders and present an interesting new gimmick, which is that they usually start in ground form, but when there is a unit in front of them, they quickly transition into airborne state. After which we get introduced to the bulky type of enemy in the form of Glare Wardens, which have a high physical armor and move very slowly. They can also regen their HP while in melee combat, allowing them to persist for longer when they're being stalled. And finally, the other two enemies that we encounter already in the first stage are Spider Sisters and Priests of the Web, which act very similarly to their original variants from the cultist stages, in that Spider Sisters will summon Glare Brutes instead of Phantoms, while Priests of the Web will transform into a Glare Warden instead of an Abomination. In the following stage we get introduced to two other new enemies, one of which is the Funk, which is basically a buffed up version of Glare Brutes, who also have Wife Steal with each attack and a chance to crystallize allies, while Driders are not particularly a new enemy since we've seen them in Origins, but essentially when they kill an ally, which is being poisoned, it will turn to another Dryad, with the goal to overwhelm your defenses. And finally, during the boss stage we get introduced to Silk Daughters, which when killed give a web on the floor for a while, which can act as a speed buff for the other spiders since they get increased movement speed while moving over webs. So this was our roster of 8 enemies that the Arachnophobia campaign features, and with that said, let's start describing each one of them and what I did and did not like about them. What sets Alliance apart is that it made a clear stance that it's not going to be reusing enemies from its previous areas, but this has finally been broken with the Arachnophobia update. We can already notice that by seeing the Glare Brutes, which is completely logical considering it's a spider-related campaign, but at the same time I expected to see something new, but I'll give it a swag this time around. Ballooning spiders on the other end are an excellently designed enemies. Alliance is notorious for having really obnoxious enemies, but this time around I think that the team nailed it with the design. I'm a really big fan of the gimmick that this enemy presents, since it gives a chance for your towers to engage with them, because when they spawn they would usually be walking instead of flying, and they'll only transition to an airborne form when there is a unit in front of them, which when compared with the obnoxious design that winged crocs have, it's really a breath of fresh air. Personally, I would rank ballooning spiders as the second best flank enemy inside the game, just behind mods from Undying Fury, since their gimmick really makes you think outside of the box, while forcing you to spread your defense throughout the entire length of the level, which I personally really enjoyed. Now ballooning spiders gives a chance for artilleries to shine, allowing them to target them while being in their ground form and incentivizing you to keep your barracks away from the track. The only critique that I have against them is that their design doesn't convey the fact that they have medium armor. During my regular playthrough I never really noticed that and was wondering why my archers were seemingly dealing no damage to them. It was after I checked their stats that I found out about this, so I think that it should have been conveyed more clearly. We all know that spiders are usually associated with high magic resistance, so this is where Glare Wardens come in. They're essentially the powerhouse of this campaign since it doesn't have any mini-boss, and this is the closest thing that we have. I personally really enjoy the design. I think that it has been done really well. I also really like the gimmick that he can regen his HP while being in combat, and I firmly believe that he complements the roster of enemies really well. Unfortunately though, this is precisely where all of my praises towards the enemy ends, so let's now venture into the things that mainly inspired the creation of this video. As you may be aware by now, Spider Sisters and Priests of the Web are an exact replica of already existing enemies, being Twisted Sisters and Priests, with the only notable change being that they have been recolored from red to white, signalizing their transition to the web code. I'll be 100% honest, I am very disappointed by their designs. I think that they are very lazy, and I think that the team could have done a far better job while designing them. Even adding small things like an extra fangs or webs around their design could have elevated them greatly, but all they did was turn the filter from red to white and call it a day. I'm 100% sure that anyone with bare bones knowledge of how to use any editing software can do that in basically 5 minutes. To think that the same team was responsible behind making the Undying Fury and Ancient Hunger enemies, which all had distinct and original assets, to simply recoloring already existing ones is just disappointing. Alliance made a stance from its release that it has an outstanding art style and showed that it's capable to thrive in that department, but seeing the team bring in already existing enemy from previous game, reuse an enemy that was already present in the main campaign, and recover two existing enemies all in the same campaign was a really low bar. It generally made me feel like this was some sort of a fan-made modded campaign, and if I was told that that was an official expansion, I would start laughing in disbelief. I mentioned quickly about them using an enemy from a previous game, which I meant under Driders from Origins, which made a reappearance with a slight base model, which was updated while keeping its abilities from the aforementioned game. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of reusing enemies from previous games, as I've already seen them and would rather see the team come up with new concepts instead. The design is simply modernized to fit the Alliance aesthetic, but that's about it. If anything, it made me feel that they were lacking ideas on what enemies to include and decided to use Driders just as a filler. But the fiasco doesn't end there. Leech Fangs have an obnoxious design, and it's probably the ugliest enemy that this entire franchise has seen. Silk Daughters as a compensation have an appealing design, but the name choicing is really awkward to me. So far we had Sons of Mactan and Sons of Sarelgas, but why are they named Silk Daughters and not Daughters of Majel instead? Yet again, it just simply ruins the consistency and would have been way more appealing to have them follow the same working formula. And I swear that I'm probably not the only person who played through the campaign once and the next day already forgot that Seal Daughters existed. With all said and done, I would also like to briefly touch on how each enemy complements the enemy roster of the campaign and what values did it exactly bring to the table. Glare Brutes achieved their role of being the spamming type enemy that fills the gaps and introduces the vibes of the campaign. It makes your defenses be oriented into using archers and especially artillery, which is good for starters since mage towers are usually more prevalent. Ballooning spiders acted as a way to nerf artilleries indirectly and incentivize you to use mages due to their medium physical resistance. The only thing I didn't like about them is how they get spammed from wave 1 on the Forgotten Throne, which hinders too many starting strategies. Glare Wardens, as I described, complement the enemy roster in an excellent fashion, making you focus on insta-kills and magic damage since every other enemy is present with magic resistance. Now for the rest of the enemies, I'll be completely transparent. They brought absolutely no value to the enemy roster. Priests of the Weapon Spider Sisters have an equal HP pool, and they die to the same set of towers. A single Trican put in their path can trivialize them without any issues. Leech Fangs serve absolutely zero purposes since they boast the same HP pool as the aforementioned enemies, as well as Driders and Silk Daughters. All three of these enemies once again die to the same tower roster, with only Driders successfully managing to accomplish one thing, which was to nerf the usage of low tier barracks. Yet they cannot apply their poison to the demon pit, since the demons die in one hit either way, but that's just a nitpick for me. What I mean by all of this is that the game will send you a set of 5 Leech Fangs, followed up by a set of 5 Driders, and finishing off with a set of 5 Silk Daughters. But if your defense was capable enough to beat the 5 Leech Fangs in first place, it would have no issues dealing with the other 2. Same can be applied to Spider Sisters and Priests of the Web. The only redeeming factor is that they at least shift the meta and allow for artilleries to thrive more, which was a nice change of pace. I feel like there is no point for me to criticize the wave formations, since the team doesn't really have a proper enemy roster to work with, or at least I don't see myself capable enough to create an interesting and engaging wave compositions with the enemies that are presented inside this campaign. There was a lot of wasted potential when it comes to the enemy roster, which could have been remedied by adding in a mini boss type enemy, but as it stands it will not allow for the levels to thrive as much as they should. We talked about the enemies, now it's time to discuss the boss. Majel, as I stated previously, is a hybrid between a human and a spider, similar to Driders. Her arsenal of abilities features a life drain aura, where she steals the lives of all soldiers near her, a webbing attack trying to stun all of your nearby towers, which demands a quick action by the player, an area stun high damage attack which is meant to clear any barracks around her, and finally a speed attack which covers the screen in webs for like 2 seconds. Her diverse kit may seem overwhelming at first glance, but it's honestly counterproductive. Magel tries to actively circulate between her abilities, which in the process makes her move very rarely. This made it so that you don't even have the need to set up a barrack in front of her to stall, which was completely different from Abominor, where it was demanded. The change of pace can be viewed as a redeeming factor, but I personally found it shallow and not intriguing enough. Yes, her kit is shiny and over the top, but it didn't really accomplish what it desired to achieve. Overall, Magel is not the hardest boss inside the game, but neither is the easiest. I would personally like to see her getting a movement speed increase, which would help her remedy the fact as to how well she stalls herself. Her design, as I also stated, would have been much better to be an entire spider rather than a drider, which resulted in her having some really uncanny expressions. Some may find them hilarious, but to me the serious tone seems to have been shattered. A fellow creator by the name of Holland described that the art style of Alliance was too cartoonish compared to previous games, which I didn't really agree at the time, but after seeing Magel, I can confidently say that Ironhide leaned too much onto the cartoonish vibe. There are many things to be desired from the boss of Arachnophobia, but as it stands, it was mediocre at best. The newest tower inside the update was Search Colossus. Starting off, to me that tower seems to be belonging to another game, and is far from managing to fit in within the Alliance art style. I get that we are inside a fantasy world where we get to use living trees as towers, but animated rocks was not what I was envisioning when it comes to the tower roster. The tower functions in a way that it deals 5 true damage across all of its levels, with each upgrade giving the tower an extra bounce and increased damage multiplier. Essentially on the first hit, when maxed out, the tower will deal 5 damage to one enemy, 7 to second one, 11 to the third, 16 to the fourth, and if the RNG rolled a bounce of 5, 20 to the final enemy. If you don't know what I mean under RNG, let me explain. On each attack, when the tower is maxed out, the beam has a 50% chance of being able to bounce up to 4 or 5 enemies. When it doesn't roll the higher number, its DPS gets roughly 40% lower, which is pathetic to think about. And again, the damage is highly dependent on the premise that you have at least 4 enemies inside the Colossus range. If that's not the case, then you have 1k gold tower dishing out 5 DPS to a single enemy, which when compared with say L1 Stargazer is roughly 10 times lower. So in nature, the tower should be viewed as an artillery, and if anything it tries to replicate the mighty Tesla, but ended up being just a knockoff version. To elaborate, one of the Colossus abilities is an energy field that deals 5 damage a second to all enemies within the tower's range for 10 seconds, which also slows them in the process, but the ability has a cooldown of 28 seconds. Yes, we are talking about a total of 50 area damage over the span of 10 seconds, after which there is a cooldown period of 18, which is just ludicrously high. And that ability is not cheap either, needing over 500 gold to max out. The other ability allows the Colossus to crystallize up to 4 enemies when maxed out, making them receive 20% extra damage from all sources. Overall, as I explained, the tower feels like a rip-off Tesla which doesn't accomplish anything on its own. If you happen to find success with it, it was most likely because you had paired it with either Tricannon, L1 Stargazer or Channeler, which did the heavy gifting for you. To further understand how bad the tower is, I would recommend playing the boss stage Iron Challenge, where you are given the worst tower in the game in the form of Twilight Longbows and Paladins, and you'll see what I mean by that. If I were to rank it, I would place it as either the worst or second worst tower inside the game, in D tier, just behind Twilight Longbows. Spider is the newest hero that comes with the update, so I'll just briefly touch on her backstory, after which we'll talk more in depth about her. Spider is a hero consisting of two units, one Twilight Elf and a Spider. The race of the Spider which the Twilight Elf is riding has been terminated by the third Spider Queen, hence why it seeks revenge. I personally enjoy the design and find it cool that after all these years and with how prominent spiders are within the series, we finally get to see a Spider team related hero. I have virtually no gripes with the design and think that whoever is responsible for it did a phenomenal job. Now for her kit. Spider has both a ranged and melee attacks. When in melee combat, she will inflict a weak poison on the targeted enemy, which deals some additional poison damage. Her ranged attack damage is also respectable and enough to help your defense against flying enemies. Seeing as that she is a magic type hero, she doesn't fare that well against most of the enemies inside the new campaign, so there are definitely better places for you to unfold her true potential. Her main gimmick is that she has a 5-second insta-kill attack which triggers on stunned enemies below 1k HP. This is her signature skill which, when utilized properly, can allow Spider to reach insane damage values. Her hero spell is the easiest way to make her trigger the insta-kill, as she spawns 5 spiders which have a chance to stun an enemy with each hit. Say you use it on a summoner type enemy, teleport Spider there and you have the enemy executed. Also works very well when managing to bring Glare Wardens below 1k HP, since they're quite hard to kill without magic damage. The other way I like to use her is to exploit the Burrow ability, which acts like a mini tri-cannon shell each time she arrives from the ground. It can get annoying rather quick due to the consistent micro required, but is satisfying when executed properly. Overall, I think Spider was a hero with a great design, interesting playstyle, and managed to bring something new inside Alliance. I would personally rank her somewhere around the middle of A tier, and if you want to bring her full potential, I highly recommend trying her out with Arborian Emissary's Roots and Ballista's Final Nail, since both of them will allow for her to trigger her insta-kill much more often. Now let's briefly discuss the stage related to gimmicks. Starting off with Default Temple, we get to use the Redeem Cultists, which were nice to see on our side. Compared to Ancient Hunger, where in Arborian Hamlet we had 3 different towers to explore, it's at least better than Colossal Warfare, where the best we got was surprise entrances for enemies. The tower is cost effective and I would usually advise to get the Cultists. Just know that they can't regen their hit points, so bring in a Wainerian hero to bring them to full with each hero spell usage can help solve that problem. In Breeding Chamber, the stage gimmick is that there are tons of additional places from where spiders emerge, be it side webs, spider eggs, you name it. This makes the stage very chaotic, stressing and significantly harder. There are also webs on the floor which slow all ally units a bunch, but also boost the speed of Spider and the enemies, which has a nice touch. I found it more irritating than fun to play around, but that is probably just me. There is also a Mactan ripoff which thematically makes no sense to be there, but I digress. It will constantly try to web your empty tower spots, so just filling them up with tier 1 demon pits completely erases him from the picture. I just found it as a pointless addition to the stage. The final stage had those spider webs on the floor yet again, but this time they felt more prominent as enemies on the left side really benefited from the speed boost. Additionally, Magia would occasionally summon Glare Wardens from the top, and a secret passage would open in the middle from time to time. These two didn't really manage to make the stage harder, just added in some extra flavor so as to not make the stage feel hollow. In conclusion, I think that they could have done much more in terms of stage gimmicks, but what we got was respectable enough. Also, I would just like to quickly point out a suggestion that I saw while browsing Reddit, where a guy suggested that the big spider where Magia resided would spawn at the end of the stage, similar to how Abominor showed, but yeah, I just found it funny. The art style of the new stages didn't manage to pique my interest and felt more or less samey. This is simply due to the theme which the campaign decided to have, but it was to be expected. At the end of the day, there are so many things you can really do with webs and spiders. The Easter eggs were neither interesting nor boring, just in the middle. The ones in Colossal Warfare were much more engaging and fascinating to explore. In short, I think the team managed to achieve some alright results when designing the stages, but I just feel like they could have done much more. To summarize everything said in this video, I found the Arachnophobia update to be the worst out of all the previous expansions in Alliance. It felt more like a modded campaign, acting as a fuel while we wait for the next DLC rather than an actual official expansion. The fact that the team managed to come up with only 2 unique enemies in the form of ballooning spiders and glare wardens is really disappointing. Recovering enemies is a serious no-no from me, and the very least they could have done was to add in some additional details to make them stand out more. The war was neither engaging nor made me hyped, it was very straightforward and shallow. The new hero was an excellent addition to the game that I don't have many negative things to say about. The new tower is incredibly disappointing, underpowered in most cases, does not fit the Alliance style and is incredibly RNG dependent. It pains me to say this, but if that's what will be the norm of future updates, I'll have no more passion to play that game. I expect seeing innovation and uniqueness, but it seems we are stuck in stale waters. My headcanon is that Arachnophobia was a tool for Ironhide to give themselves more time to work on creating far more better campaigns since they ran out of store after the game's release. I hope this theory is true, otherwise Alliance may be the final nail in the coffin for the franchise. Look, I truly love this franchise, so it really pains me to see that we suddenly got from the quality of Pirate Kings and Ancient Hunger to a campaign which felt like it tried to steal as much as possible from previous ones. I truly wish the best for Alliance going forward and hope that the next DLC will be of far greater quality and similar to that of Pirate Kings. What I want from Ironhide is to just take a chill pill, try and fix some of the already existing issues, bugs, adding the godforsaken enemy encyclopedia finally, allow us to skip cutscenes, consider an endless level to give players some sort of replayability value, and stop rushing updates for the sake of consistency. We already saw the Colossal Warfare fiasco and they didn't take notes from it. With that said, I sincerely thank you for watching my review all the way to the end, and if you disagree with some of the points I listed, feel free to list them in the comments down below. It's been an honor for me to share my thoughts with all of you and hope to hear back from you next time on a positive occasion. Rush on and take care everyone.